and welcome to What the Tech. I'm your host, Rolando Rosas. And on today's episode, we're talking about the job. It's all about the job and how you can stand out on that next interview and be a great candidate rather than a good job candidate. And for those that are joining us for the first time, What the Tech is a podcast designed to help you sound and look your best. And we talk about topics dealing with IT, gear for the office, as well as the hot trends in the workplace. And joining me and coming along for the ride, fresh out of Fenway Park, my co-host Dave Kelly.
Rolando, I knew going to a game on Sunday was going to spark some controversy about where I went on Sunday to Fenway Park. Listen,
Yeah,
it was a great day to be back at the park. I haven't been in over a year.
was it?
So.
Was it packed? Was it sold out?
It was probably 80% capacity. You know,
Okay.
there was a few quiet sections, but the energy was high. The game was
Quiet
great.
at Fenway
the weather
Park.
was awesome. You know, we had one of everything. Really fun. There was even there was a couple sitting next to us that it was their first time. They were from out of town. They had never been to the park before, and all they were doing was Instagramming and getting
Oh,
pictures
really?
of themselves out there. And then they were out of there in like 3 or 4 innings. It was almost like they checked it off their list of things to do in life and got out of there.
A bucket listing. So did the Red Sox win? That's the question.
Yeah,
They
the
won.
Red Sox win. Won. JD Martinez was clutch, and was still in the hunt for first. So it was a good time.
Well, there's a lot of baseball left. We'll have to see. Can the Yankees make up some ground?
I'm sure they will. Right now, we got our eyes on Tampa. So we want to jump into our trivia question right now. Let's see what our producer has for us.
Yeah.
Has in store for us today. Oh, nice and easy, Rolando. I like a good true or false. It's a black or white.
Yeah. You want me to do it or you want to do it?
I'll throw it out there. So the
Okay.
job interview as we know it was invented by Thomas Edison in 1921. Oh, we'll have to find out later.
Well,
I've never even thought about that. It's kind of a strange question.
it is a strange question. You got to ask yourself,
It's like someone invented the job interview, huh? Okay. All right, Ori. Well, you said it was easy and straightforward, and I think you lied again.
Okay. There you go. Just a second. I'm looking for something in my notes and they're blank. So I'm gonna freestyle it here a little bit. So we're gonna the intro to Sally, right?
Yep. So let's
Ori?
introduce our guest.
All right. So let me tell you about who we've got on today. So if you're joining us for the first time, you're in for a treat. You came to the right place. We've got Sally Thornton, founder and CEO of Forshay. She is more than just an executive coach. She helps companies find terrific talent, and she's been doing this for quite some time. So she's an expert in this field. We've wanted to get her on the podcast for quite some time now. And let's welcome out of the green room, Sally Thornton.
Hello.
Sally!
Nice to see you. Thanks for having
Sally.
me.
Thanks for
Where are you
coming.
joining us from today?
Thank you. Oh, Sonoma, California.
Sonoma, beautiful wine country, like in your backyard.
Yeah. I've only been here 3 months too, so I'm living like a tourist, which is good.
Oh, it's awesome.
Pandemic move. Yeah.
Well, I can't wait till you send us an email on what the best places to go, where to eat, and all that good stuff.
Absolutely.
All right, wonderful. Well, Sally, thank you for joining us today. We look forward to a lively, spirited discussion here with Dave and I. We definitely want to probe you on several things that are in your wheelhouse. You know, with this new normal, the job market has changed. It's a whole new ball game, and we want you to give us some of those insights. But before we get into all the insights, I want to remind folks, if you're watching us today, that if you want to show us your love and support, don't forget to like and subscribe. Hit all the bells and whistles. There you go, Dave. That one was for you.
Love it.
And so you can get in on what's happening because we release several other nuggets throughout the week. And the only way to know is if you're subscribed and notified. All right, we've got that out of the way. What I want to do now is, before we get into all the action with Sally, I just want Sally to tell us a little bit about yourself so folks get to really know who you are, what you do, and what you're passionate about.
Thanks. I grew up in Minnesota, and once I graduated college, wanted to get the heck into a
Understood.
Yeah, exactly. Although I will say I didn't go to a better environment in terms of weather. I went to New York, but it was a fun environment to start my career. Then I learned how to talk fast and walk fast, and Minneapolis is called the Mini Apple, so it was fun to kind of go to the Big Apple.
The real one.
Yeah, exactly. And then I moved out to California in '99. My husband went to business school out here. And we said, we'll just do a few years in California and then we'll go back. And now it's been 22 years.
Well, you never went back.
Yeah, I still have my 917 cell phone number from New York.
Whoa, you don't give up that number.
Right? It's like Sex in the City. You don't give up the number. And, for me, it was about, I started my career actually in compensation consulting, thinking that if we just designed the perfect compensation plan, people would act rationally. And this was before behavioral economics was a thing. And so it was fascinating because it was a way of using math, right, in the field of HR, which tends to be more human centric. And somehow that seems to be opposed to math. Mm-hmm. So I was a little bit of a weird duck in that field. But when I came out here, I had to join a tech company because being a consultant, I was working with Ernst & Young. It just wasn't cool in the Bay Area. You have to join
it's Tech. Tech is it's like being in DC and not being in some kind of government job.
Nailed it. So I joined a voice over IP company and DSL company back in the day, and was designing compensation plans again, with the stock and trying to get everyone to do the right thing. And then I was pregnant and trying to navigate this, how am I going to have a baby in tech? Because you work 80 hours a week, at least in the Bay Area, and frankly, New York too. It was very much an American thing, right? Just work hard, keep your head down. But my mom had a 60th birthday in Minnesota. And so my sister and brother said, come fly out. And I'm like, well, I'm 6 months pregnant. So I don't know if this is the best time to surprise her. And also I have all this important work to do. I was delivering compensation reports to the board. And I felt kind of important in my job because everyone wants to talk about equity and stock. And my husband was working at McKinsey, and we were both working all the time. We had this definite American work ethic of work all the time. And so I didn't think I could do it. But my brother, who had survived leukemia when he was, when I was in 7th grade, had learned this fancy carpe diem. And so he said, get on the plane, carpe diem. So I got on the plane, went to my mom's party. It was great. And I came back, and 2 months later, my dad called and said, sit down. And I was like, what? And he said, your brother's been killed in a plane crash. And I was 31. He was 37. I'm 8 months pregnant and just overwhelmed. Because I almost didn't see him. I was so dedicated to my job, being a hard worker, that I had no idea that would be the last time I saw him. And it kind of put me into a spin. How did I almost make the worst mistake of my life? And the joke in the Bay Area is when you have a mental breakdown, start a company. That's how you solve it.
That's a cruel joke.
So I did. So I dove into the data around work. Why do we have this work ethic? Why we know it's good, but how can it be extreme? Right. And so I spent time at Stanford researching the future of work. And I really learned that the way in which we work is a little bit broken, that the always on mentality, it was too much. Do you think this is also uniquely American? There's a few countries like this that I've read about it because the culture supports this type of work ethic. It essentially, I don't want to say glorifies, but maybe the incentives are aligned in order to do that versus other countries where that's probably not the case. Exactly. So Japan actually has a word for death by overwork.
Really?
We don't have that word. I mean, we probably say heart attack, but yeah. And so it definitely exists in other cultures. But famously, it doesn't, that's not how the Swedes look at it. And so it's interesting to look at cultures to understand the water you swim in, right? So that's where I really liked social science, because even though I was really into, math, I spent more time in the social science realm to try and Venn diagram, like how do these things interact, and how might we redesign work in ways that actually benefit everybody? Because I'm a capitalist. I love I love how the US economy works and benefits and creates innovation, and there's so much goodness to it, but we always have to look at the flip side, right? Whenever we love something, we should always say, okay, but what's not good about it? Because it keeps us fresh, it keeps us thinking, and those critical thinking skills. So anyway, that's what drove me to start a company around how might we redesign work with diverse teams, because there weren't that many women having babies at the executive level at my company. When I looked around at this, it was called COVAD, there were very few women. And it was, and that was surprising to me, right? Because I grew up in Minnesota where I thought everything was equal and like it was a meritocracy. But when I started to look at the data, right, math, I was like, the data tells a different story than what I've been told in the ethos that like it's a meritocracy, and So it was just a really interesting way to say, like, how might we start to look at the data, start to design differently, and allow it to be a win-win-win. So triple bottom line, right? It's totally possible. We just have to be more thoughtful in the design. So that's the company I started. It was basically around how do we build better teams with diversity? How do we think about overwork by supplying interim talent? So we're a little weird at Forshay. We don't just do executive search in the way that you might think about the big firms. We also do interim. So interim is wonderful because if you have, I'll give you a real story, VP of marketing at Shutterfly, she was French, and she called me up and she said, I'm not taking your American maternity leave. I want a real maternity leave. And so, but she didn't want to leave her team, a human, down for 6 months, right? So we talked about, okay, let's let your number two step up and get that exposure to the executive team and stretch a little bit, but not set him up for failure by having to have 2 jobs. So we actually ended up backfilling him with an interim marketing person who took some stuff off his plate. So it allowed the team to succeed while she was gone, not be frustrated that she's gone, right? Wow. And so we just have to be more thoughtful to the fluidity that's required in the future of work, which is a lot more about mixing skills, talent, and in different paces, right? It isn't always 80 hours a week. So how do we think about that more critically is really what I'm all about. So it's interim, executive search, and diversity and inclusion.
Well, I want to ask you about that because that's exactly what we want to jump into, which is, how has the last 18 months impacted people's thinking, both from a hiring perspective as well as employees, because the shift has to happen on both ends of the equation. Employees need to demand that they want a better work-life balance, which is what you're talking about.
Yep.
And employers have to understand that employees aren't robots and they aren't machines, in that they can break down and will break down. And as you said, maybe we need an American word for being death by work, right?
Yeah. Hopefully not the death part, but for sure, what used to not be talked about is now front and center, which is mental health, well-being, right? Whatever words you're comfortable with, because obviously there's a spectrum, right? Of well-being just being, how do we have healthy practices and transparency at work where people feel that inclusion and psychological safety. There's all these really important words that allow people to do their best work and feel good in their bodies and in their work. That's well-being. But then you can go all the way to really difficult, challenging mental health, right? So that also, especially with COVID, is a real topic that we need to be able to have a safe space. And we used to have this very divided brains, right? You just show up at work and you kind of perform. It was almost like a different part of you, and you would sort of put your human side away. But with the pandemic, we've all had to become integrated and just be ourselves, which is a wonderful challenge, right?
It looks like I can see into your living room. You have a beautiful background there. You have trees. I know that you're into, maybe nature because you live in that environment. You chose to, especially if you're telling me you didn't, in the last 3 months you moved there. It gives me more insight and can build. We had a guest on a couple of weeks ago who was talking about the role of this whole, the dynamics has changed. I can see a window into who you are, and we can create a much stronger connection than if we were, only meeting in the office, periodically brushing against each other in the hallway or at the water cooler.
Right. And that's exactly it. And so that human side, so how do we harness it for good, right? That's the question I think is really interesting, because we can talk about all the changes and what's hard, but I really think if we focus on like what's great about it, it's more transparency to be ourselves, which therefore saves our energy. We're not playing a role, which is exhausting, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's also being able to ask for what you really need, which potentially allows you to do your job better, right? So these things can be really, really good. Also, obviously, we're not commuting, right? So you save all this time.
Right.
You have more time with whoever your loved ones are, right?
Mm-hmm.
So there's a lot of that we can harness that we don't want to lose into going forward. So back to your original question of like, what's going to change? Most candidates right now ask for a lot more flexibility, which used to be like flex used to be a 4-letter F word.
Oh,
It was like, you're asking for what? You're not a dedicated all-in worker. It's like, well, I'm asking for more autonomy. I'm asking for more control. And that's actually what we want. We want adults, who are responsible and know how to achieve their results by giving them more autonomy. So the new workplace is definitely going to have much more of a hybrid approach. And some in the recruiting world, some of the clients are asking for people to come in like 2 to 3 days a week in the fall. And we have a lot of candidates who are like, nope.
No.
And so
we're hearing the same thing from other guests that have been on the show. We have 3 or 4 in a row. Shane Howard, Steve Cadigan, Barbie Brewer.
Yeah.
They've all basically been saying the same thing. A bunch of studies have all come out in the last couple of months saying the same thing.
Yep.
And I want to ask you if you are seeing any shift on the employer side about, the attitude of work. And how some CEOs have been saying throughout the summer, nope, come into the office as of the last couple of weeks. Some of the big bank CEOs are saying you got to be in person by Labor Day, whereas some other companies are saying, no, we're going to embrace hybrid as the way to go because we have to be resilient.
Yeah, it really comes down to asking the question, why? So if you are a janitor, you need to clean the floors of the biotech company that's, trying to figure out how to solve cancer, right? But if you're a marketing professional at that biotech company, why do you need to be in the office? Maybe you're going to have a brainstorming session where you want to, be doing sticky notes on the wall. Okay, then that would be a reason to go in. But what it can't be is I'm going to go into the office to do email, right? So it's really about just asking questions that make sense. So what makes sense in terms of collaboration? What makes sense in terms of results? That's the thing that we want to ask both clients and candidates as we think about how do you do your best work? Because we also don't want to set people up for failure where they say, I want to work from home, but actually 90% of that team is in the office 3 days a week. And there's a lot of debate going on that they're missing out on, right? Mm-hmm. So to me, it's never one or the other. The question is, what is the best of both? And how do we ask questions around designing for the work versus just assuming and kind of defaulting into, we just go in and somehow innovation is going to happen and somehow team bonding is going to happen. No, we need to just be more intentional. I think that's kind of the key word for me is like, if you're intentional in your design of what's the work you're going to do and why, then going into the office makes sense because you know the outcome. You're actually designing for an outcome versus just saying like, I don't know, but when we hit each other out in the halls, just great things are going to happen. Sparks are going to fly. It's like, I don't know.
And, we've had some folks on that have said that the technology doesn't lend itself to that spontaneity, that passing in the hallway. And I tend to disagree. We're a virtual organization where, we have our hubs.
Yep.
A lot of us are communicating on the fly.
Yep.
With creative ideas, just using the technology that we have and doing it wherever we might be. It might not be a home office. It might be at a Starbucks or just in the car or wherever it might be. But we get together often, sometimes even just for short little bursts.
Yeah.
That's spontaneous, just to be spontaneous and come up with an idea and bounce it off a coworker. We do it often.
Yeah. So it goes back to what you're talking about, Dave, is like, what's required for your job and how do you make it happen? So when Tim Cook came out and talked about his new, the new products, during the pandemic, he said openly like, wow, we didn't really think innovation could happen this way, but it has. And And before, because I've worked with that company, they really didn't believe in remote work.
I'm surprised. I'm surprised about that, Sally, because I've read as well their hybrid work policies aren't as flexible as Twitter or LinkedIn or Facebook, and they're still even more rigid than their tech peers. I'm
That's right.
surprised that given that in a company where innovation is the culture, the norm seems to be behind their norm seems to be behind the trend of the other tech companies. I don't know. You tell me.
Yeah, no. So this is why social science to me is so illuminating, because there's a bias, and I don't know exactly the term, but it's essentially success bias. Like when you reach success, whatever that is, you believe that the way in which you got there needs to be repeated. Right?
Interesting.
And so when you have an executive where like, this is how we've been successful for however many years, it's really hard to say to that executive, well, your lived experience, it's totally going to be different in the future, because that's your lived experience.
Right.
This is how we were successful. So it definitely makes a difference to who the leader is and what they believe, right? Because other companies who've been doing this a while are flipping on a dime. It depends on what the leader believes will be successful for the team, right? So when Tim came out in the pandemic and said, we have really good products and services, and then to your point, Rolando, when now the pandemic is having more openness because of the vaccine, he wants people back in the office. There's a lot of chatter around what is best, because now we have experienced something else, and how might we take what was good about that, also take what was good about being in the office, and then be thoughtful to the design. It's really a hard question, and it does make a difference. What's the culture of your company? What are you designing? Are you products or services? Are you, biotech? Obviously, you have people in the lab. So there isn't a this is the way to do it. It is really about saying, at this point in our company culture, at this point in our growth, how might we design with the voice of everyone included? I think that's one of the big shifts that we've seen, is that now, because of technology, the voice of the employees is heard so much louder. Right?
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. They're in the driver's seat more than ever before.
That's right.
And I, you know what? You said something about leadership, and I want to play for you something from one of those people that we just mentioned. And I want to get your thoughts on it, because it's relevant to what you just talked about with leadership. And I want to play for you, and then we'll have some comments on the other side of the video. Go for it, Ori.
There is a great talent reshuffle unfolding right now in the world. Every CEO, every executive team at every company right now is trying to figure out what their company looks like moving forward. Is it remote? Is it hybrid? And what they're actually doing is rethinking their culture and rethinking their values of how their company works. On the other hand, you have every employee in the world that's been, working remotely over the past year, trying to figure out not only how or where they work moving forward, but why they want to work moving forward. They're rethinking their values as well.
There you go. So this is a leader.
Yep.
Just 2 weeks ago, they were still 2.5 weeks ago, they were still planning on a fall re-entry of bringing everybody back in. And then he course corrected and said, no, situation is dictated that we can just now allow everybody to work from home indefinitely or until conditions change, because the situation right now, today, as of August 17th, is not the same as it was on May 17th.
Yep. That's adaptive leadership, right? Is I got new data, I can update my browser.
My human browser.
Yeah. And also, this goes to humble leadership, which is maybe what I said before was wrong, or maybe what I said was before was right for that time, and now the data has changed, right? And so being able to change your mind, right, and not have it work against you because you're flip-flopping or indecisive. It's not that, right? It's that I'm paying attention, I'm listening, I have new data, and so I'm gonna try this. And also, frankly, everything's an experiment. Anytime we make a decision, we can change it. And so I think, we love experiments in innovation when we're building products. So why don't we also love experiments when it comes to how we build the products, right? Knowing that if we try this and it's not working, we'll change, right?
And that, that must be such an interesting feeling for employees that are part of those organizations, because like you said, that the humble leadership, that's setting that pace for the culture, and I can see where some organizations that have those sort of leaders, their culture is slowly changing. Like, okay, they understand, they are looking at data, new data, not data that was given to us 6 months ago or 18 months ago.
That's right.
This little change here, it happened pretty quickly, and I can see how that can have a positive impact within the culture of a company as well.
Yep. And people also want to feel heard. So I think the other advantage to employees of LinkedIn, because that was CEO of LinkedIn, is, if they are speaking up and saying, this is what we want, and then he says, okay, like that's just a huge, engaging, energizing culture to work in, that I feel heard, that my voice does make a difference. And again, if things shift and they're seeing numbers that aren't trending the right way, then he might change his mind to a different approach and say why, right? I heard you, and then we saw this data, and now we're going to go this direction. So I just think being data-driven as a leader, being a really good listener, all of these things matter when people are thinking about which company to join. And they do have choice now, right? This is a really strong economy. This is a candidates market. And we actually had one candidate turn down a client because they didn't have a very strong point of view during Black Lives Matter. They were listening but not acting. And since we focus on diverse teams, we always have a diverse slate. And we hear from candidates from underrepresented groups tell us, if I'm going to get 3 companies to choose from, I'm going to look at all of the bundle of what they're offering. Obviously, money, title, responsibility, right? Career progression and learning. These are the key things that they care about. And added to the list is, do they align with my values?
Right. And I would imagine that as conditions have been changing over the last 18 months, I would imagine the pressure, and maybe you can give us a window into what's happening with hiring managers, because like you said, employees are changing their attitudes about work, changing what they value. Maybe before, the salary was at the top of their list in terms of, this is the only thing I'm going to take, and this is the only thing I'll accept, where maybe salary is still in the consideration. Obviously it is, but maybe instead of being 1, maybe it's 3, and it's now alignment with values. So I was wondering if you could give us a window into what's going on with hiring managers as things are changing, and what's the thinking there in there's the headspace, what's happening in the psychology of those hiring managers that are now looking at a new landscape. So
for the hiring managers, I would say they're really just looking for someone who's going to get the job done. Hiring managers,
it's hot.
It's basically like, how's the pulse? And they're looking for demonstrated performance. So one of the shifts actually that's changed in the science that we've seen is, we used to believe experience equal performance. It's not true. You can have tons of experience in one culture and it's not going to translate to the other. So it's actually performance that we want to look at, demonstrated performance in the prior job. So hiring managers who pay attention to correlations say, okay, I don't want to just see on a resume that you've done 15 years of marketing, in digital, blah, blah, blah. I want to know, what was your performance in that role, in these roles, and your progression. So that's what's shifted on the hiring side.
Interesting.
Yeah. On the candidate side, the first thing they ask for is, how much remote?
So number one, so let's not gloss over that, because that's important. So before, that probably was way down the list, and maybe if you were further up the food chain, maybe a VP level, a director level, they probably had the the audacity really to ask for, hey, I want to be at home with the kids twice a week. Can you give that to me? Now, probably junior, mid-level, even entry-level people are asking for that. Yeah,
that's exactly right. So that is the first question. And then it is, the team, because it always, when you think about success in a role, it's so much dependent on your manager. So they want to know, what's this person like, right? What will I succeed in the role because of the culture of this team and the leadership of whoever is going to be my manager? That's number 2. Then how am I going to grow and learn so that whatever my compensation and title are, I feel a path forward, right? People don't really want to jump to a job and then have to go to a totally different company to get the next job. They want to be able to see if they can grow within a company. And growing doesn't always mean up. It's much more of a jungle gym than a ladder. That's been very well documented, that's more inspiring and actually gets you further in terms of your ability to have lots of different skills and experiences than just a linear path. So learning and development remains critical. And then for sure, underneath all of that is conversation around values and culture. So it's almost like it's not a separate conversation on culture and values. It's embedded in every part of the conversation, right? Does that make sense?
Fascinating. Yep, it does. It's fascinating. And I'm wondering how organizations, obviously with the job market is hot, and you're saying, take a pulse, you're hired. At some point that's going to shake out, and employers that are still more rigid in their approach to maybe remote work, using the technology available to get the job done. What do you think their prospects are going to be when more and more workers are demanding this type of work shift?
Sorry, say that again.
So how are companies that are left behind? Basically, what, like, you have companies that are still saying, like you said, maybe the leaders are, I came into the office every single day, hurricane, high water, it didn't matter. I want everybody else to come in. What's going to happen to those organizations as we move forward?
Well, I think the leaders, I will say, still are very picky. So even though I joke about the pulse, I should also always say, like, it's a bell curve, right? So the leaders are still saying, we want A players. And even when I say that, I cringe a little bit, because in growth mindset, everyone can be an A player. It's just a matter of putting them in the right place. But nevertheless, I'm using the language that the hiring executives use. They want A players, and they want them to the point I was making before, to be demonstrated performance and adaptable, because we've seen that to be able to lead in a hybrid or virtual environment is really hard. So they're looking actually for those kinds of skills, which is different than before, right? Because management in a remote...
Sally, you've hit a pro tip. I want you to rewind. Ori,
Okay.
you've stumbled on a pro tip. Let's throw up a pro tip. Say that again, Sally. Pro tip.
So hiring managers want to look for demonstrated performance, right? Not just experience, but how did you perform? And they want to be able to know that you can manage in a remote environment, right? How do you adapt? How do you perform in when there's more ambiguity, right? That's a key.
Absolutely. And I would imagine that, especially that all of this, for a lot of folks, there's a lot of new muscle memory.
Yeah.
To build, like Dave was saying, we've been virtual before the pandemic. For us, it was really not a major shift. It was a really minor shift. It's tweaking things, because a bunch of new tools came on the scene that actually made the job a lot easier. And these tools got better from an IT perspective. The tools have gotten way better in the last year than they were just right when the pandemic hit, because a lot of people needed to be online. A lot of people needed to talk. Controls and security, all these things started just happening very fast, and they started coming together. And organizations that were looking at being online in 3 or 4 years, all of a sudden are online. But I'm fascinated also, as people are making this journey through the process of maybe looking at another job, and they stumble across your organization, or they want to go, let's say, work at Apple. What does that journey look like today, given that technology plays a role? I think I heard you say something that hiring has become faster, and video is really one of those tools that's allowing some of this growth and acceleration in the recruitment process to take place.
Yeah. And most of the recruiting that we do is at a professional level. So there are different ways that the recruiting process works based on industry and what kind of job. So I'm not going to be able to speak to all of it. But in the professional roles, video makes the difference in the sense of like, they're not submitting video, resumes, which I know does happens more at the entry level, which is, I think, really fascinating. But video is part of the interview process, so it can go faster, right? Because it's a pandemic. So whereas before, executives might want to fly people in and have them meet with a panel of hiring executives, which can take a long time to logistically figure out. Now it's just boom, boom, boom. So the fact that there's video interviews makes the process faster because logistics have just become much more fluid. So it allows people to make decisions faster. But as candidates are trying to line up offers, they often want to have more than one offer at the same time. So they have to sometimes say like, oh, I'm going on vacation, right? Or not available for this period of time, trying to stretch it out. But yeah, on both sides of the equation, it can go faster. And frankly, that's kind of a win. Back to efficiencies of like, what are the benefits of all of this? Like, let's not waste time. Let's quickly get to know each other and let's make a decision and get to work.
So talking about efficiencies, and we're talking about demonstrating success, with unified communications, video and audio, that's just the beginning. Our candidates and hiring managers taking advantage of, like content sharing so that they can visually demonstrate, or is that kind of cheating?
No, that's a great point. Yes. So again, it depends on the job. So since we do marketing and HR, a lot of the stuff in the marketing side, they do want like presentations, like show me your portfolio if you're on, depending on what your creative role is, right? So yeah, it can be much more expansive, right? To say like, how do you communicate your ideas? Show me what creative ideas you've had in the past. And it can be much more interactive than it would be maybe in an environment where you're sitting behind a desk, interviewing someone. So yeah, that's a great point.
Let me ask you now that you've mentioned that. So let's say you do have an interactive conversation and like using video as part of the interview. You're a human being. You're a recruiter. You work with hiring managers that are also human being. Does the experience, and we've had other folks come on talk about the experience of the video, whether it's audio or video, when you're having that one-on-one conversation, what you see on the screen and what you hear for your ears, does it have any impact on that decision-making process? So in other words, what I'm trying to say, are there things that are in control of the person being interviewed that they can do to increase their chances for success?
Oh, that's a great question. So yes, again, think about every medium as like, what's the benefit and what's the drawback, right? So the way that we start is with audio interviews because we want to not be biased by what our eyes see, because our eyes cannot be turned off and our brains are wired for bias. And this word bias feels like a 4-letter super scary word. It's actually a shortcut that your brain takes. This is just neuroscience. It's a shortcut to make decisions quickly, right? If my bias is I see a tall person in, a dark alley behind the restaurant, my bias is don't go down the alley, right? That's scary. That's how bias works for you. It makes a quick decision. It can also work against you, which is when you see someone who looks different than you, speaks differently than you, different age, different race, whatever. There's so many ways in which we're different. It can actually interfere because our brains are thinking, oh, I wonder what we have in common, what we don't have in common. And your brain is thinking there's something like 40,000 like bytes per second or something. Wow. It's not obviously bytes because we're not a computer, but it's like I think that's what they say, pieces of information per second. Like our brains are incredible. So by doing an audio interview first, we've just eliminated the noise that our eyes can give to our brain. And we're just can focus on what is the person saying. Now we're still going to detect a bunch of stuff in their voice, right? Are they from the South? We might hear different words that tell the age. Like it's not like we only hear words like a text, but it just takes away one layer of bias that helps us to really listen to the content of a conversation. So we start with audio. And so for candidates, the more you can do that, even if you are the majority, right? Which is white men are still the majority in terms of leadership. So that's just the data. Back to like, we can all have feelings about it. That's the data. So even if you're the majority, the audio can be great, because right now, since companies are looking at diverse teams, you might feel like that's not great, right? Because companies are wanting more underrepresented groups. So whatever your situation is, audio, this is why I always say, like, it's not a zero-sum game. You want to get the right job for you, and you want to be able to be heard, whatever all of your attributes are. So when you start with audio, you're just more you and less of the attributes, right? Then we move to video, because we are going to be talking and working in a human environment that's 3D at some point, right?
Right.
So you want to be able to say, like, how do we interact? Do I, is it hard to communicate with this person? Whatever is required, again, for the job, because there's some jobs where, excellent communication isn't important, right? And there are lots of people who are skilled in one way that maybe aren't as skilled in another. So being able to do that video interview next, and then honestly, the in-person, it's wonderful, because there is something energetic about being in the same room with someone that, especially for the executive level roles, we still say now that we're vaccinating, can be outside. It'd be great if you can meet with the person at the end live and just get that energetic feel.
So you still want that in person as part of the component. And that's what you're advising your clients to do.
I do. On the executive side, I mean, if you're hiring, 40 engineers in the month, like, it's just logistically not going to be possible. So yeah, it always depends on the role, the team, the culture, to just make sure that you're doing what's best for both sides. It's very much about both sides being as honest as possible, because that's when it's successful.
So I'm hearing that a lot of the process has mostly stayed the same. It's adapted a little bit with video, and I can think of some organizations that have been using video as part of the process for a very long time, but it's still a matter of resumes, narrowing that down, making some phone introductions, moving to video, and then moving to the in-person thing to hopefully nail it and wrap it up.
Yeah. I mean, that's the beauty of the recruiting process, is it's just humans figuring out, should we work together? Yeah. Right? So that hasn't changed. But I will say the video has really allowed a wider aperture for us to also look at talent outside of what we used to be more geographically kind of narrow, back to companies wanting people to be more in person. So the aperture is actually wider for talent to be able to think about different companies they might work for that they wouldn't have thought of before. Yep. Like, I had a nephew in Fort Collins, Colorado, and he was like, only interviewing at local companies. I was like, Ben, why are you only interviewing at Fort Collins companies? Sure. Right? You could interview at Apple. And he's like, really? And I'm like, yes. So there is a really big shift in that perspective, Dave. But like, to your point on the actual get to know you, there's just some improvements, but it's not rocket science.
Right. I actually had a friend that did a video interview about a week and a half ago. And she asked me, she said, do you think they record these and then send them to, other managers or kind of up the ladder? And I said, Carrie, that's a really good question. I haven't really asked. Is that a possibility? Are they also recording video to save time to get opinions from others?
My clients aren't, that I'm aware of. I think legally you have to disclose when you're recording something, but I'm not a lawyer.
Right, good point.
But no, my clients aren't doing that. They still wanted to feel like we're having a one-to-one improv. Again, like, but if you're in an animation company and you're trying to film something that, again, for that job would make sense to record, then you would just be transparent. Like, okay, we're going to video this and share it with the animation studio and right? So it just always has to make sense and then be transparent.
Yeah.
And what would you say about so we're talking about the process itself. Now, there are folks that are new to the video side. The phone call, easy. In person, I'm going to show up, right? But the video, there's still a lot of people that are afraid of being on camera, and a lot of meetings are still conducted with, you may have one or two that have their cameras on, and everybody else is listening on audio, right? Or just watching the presenter. Right. What would you say to folks and I want to jump into some nuggets now that would help folks as they're moving through that journey. Hey, I'm comfortable. I've talked on the phone all the time, right? Now I got to go on camera. Uh-oh, I'm nervous. There may be two people behind the camera on the other end, one person, there may be a panel, right? What
Right.
are some of the mistakes you see people make when they go to that stage and they're past stage one? We got past the audio piece. They love me. Now I got to talk and they got to look at me. What are some of the top mistakes that you see that folks make during that interview, that video interview, that would be helpful to our audience?
Great question. I think the biggest one is not being prepared. I mean, it's just kind of like 101 in terms of like, know what they're listening for. So if you go into an interview and you actually don't know what matters to them, you're walking into, a lack of clarity, which is never great for a conversation.
Oh boy.
So let's say that happens. Let's say that you have no idea what they're looking for. Then I would start the conversation from a video perspective and say, I know we only have an hour together or whatever the time is, maybe it's 30 minutes. What matters most to you? What are you listening for that I can give you specific stories to help you understand my performance on these topics? Because you want to get focused. Video, potentially you can get distracted. You can get distracted by their background or their dog ran through or whatever.
Yeah, I'm lost in the trees. I love trees. I love just looking past you and looking at those wonderful trees.
Right. So if you don't have the information coming in from a preparation perspective, then take charge of the conversation and ask, what are you listening for? What matters most? And then you want to tell stories because we learn through story. And that's what behavioral interviewing is. Because you can't just say like, I'm a punctual person and so you can't declare your attributes. You need to demonstrate them through a story that reveal your ability to perform, right? So being able to focus your stories on what they're listening for so that whatever time frame you have, you nail it. And then just, make sure that you give just as much time to them as you give to yourself, because people want to have a back and forth. So that would be the last one, is like, make sure that it's bi-directional, right? That it's fluid and everyone has a chance to speak, and being just thoughtful to airtime. I have to do that as an extrovert. I have to like, shut up, right?
You aren't saying you don't have any problem speaking now, do you?
No, I have to like ask questions and then be quiet.
You know what? We could put, Ori, you could fill us both in, screenshot us, just let Sally keep talking for another hour. We have another podcast going.
I do love this topic. I want people to do work they love, and I want, people to not be overworked. So like, I love this conversation.
No, we that's why we wanted to have you on. It's something that it's on people's mind. I was looking at some research. I was researching work from home. And if you go back and look at that word from a Google perspective, searches on work from home really accelerated through the pandemic and have still maintained a very high level of interest, even at this point. And even more so because now, I should say, prior to going into the return to work piece, which is what people were thinking, we're all going to go back by Labor Day,
Right.
hit the brakes now. Whoa, wait a minute. That may not happen nearly as fast now with what's happening today. So it's really important. We want to get that information to our audience, to our potential customers and other folks that have this topic as a top of mind, because I know it comes up all the time. So what are people doing? What are organizations doing? What are people looking for, in this hiring process? What are mistakes? And having somebody like you who is an expert and talks to people all day long about this stuff is wonderful.
Thank you. Well, I will say it's a journey, right? We're learning together. And I love sharing. Part of a learning community is having this hive mind where when you learn a cool tip and trick, you share it on your show. When I learn things, I put it on our blog. So it's forshay.com. And I just share what our clients are doing, what we're learning, because we do learn better, right? When we can learn from each other's mistakes, which we all have plenty of. So I invite, any of your listeners to follow. You're on LinkedIn or forshay.com, whatever medium you prefer. I want to learn with your listeners, right? I want us to be able to share these ideas and hopefully, have really meaningful work that people feel energized by, not depleted. And so I call it work-life blend, because balance to me is really, really hard. It feels like you're trying to achieve perfection every day. I feel like that term kind of sets us up for failure. I say work-life blend, and I love to bring in the neuroscience and the social science to help us see our blind spots. So if that's of interest, you know, I will keep blogging on LinkedIn and
Please
whatnot.
do. Please
Yeah.
do, because I want to see more of what you're talking about, the neuroscience part, because I know a lot of decision makers will say, well, I'm not going by anecdotal stuff and surveys. What's the actual hard facts?
That's right.
You know, what did you find out? And I know you had a nice line. I'll put a plug in for you. You did a TED Talk that was a couple of years ago, but still very, very relevant today. And so if you're listening to this during the live or the playback, I encourage you. And you know what? We're going to put in the links in our in the video down below in the description, so that people could just go right to that TED Talk and they can hear you speak at length about that, because the topic is just fascinating. And I'd love to, you know, come back podcast number 2 with you and just focus on the neuroscience, because I love talking about brain and what makes people tick.
Me too. I'm the super fun person that has neuroscience books by her bed.
That sounds like fun reading.
I'm really fun.
Well, you know what, Sally, we want to ask you some other fun rapid fire questions that should spark some things inside your brain as well. All right. So these are very easy. Let's jump right. You ready, Ori? All right. So what is your favorite musician or musical group?
Prince.
No doubt.
Minnesota.
Purple Rain, right in the backyard of Minnesota. Prince
I was in 2 of his videos, so I'm a little bit like the child that never grew up.
Yeah. Oh, his stuff is timeless. You know, unfortunate end to a great and wonderful musician, but the music he put out touched millions, including myself. Favorite app on your phone today?
Ooh. I have to think about favorite versus most used.
whatever pleases you.
I think probably my waking up app. So it's a mindfulness app. It's called Waking Up, and it teaches me meditation and philosophy and calms me down.
And that's the first. I haven't heard of the app, so a plug for them. So if you want mindfulness, Waking Up, is that the name of the app?
That's right.
Okay, Waking Up. Here's a good one, because you're right in the backyard of a lot of this good stuff. What's your favorite food?
Oh, right now it's wood-fired pizza. We have a pizza oven outside, and
Awesome.
it's
That's awesome.
I'm back on carbs.
Oh man, I would imagine, especially where you're around there, there's probably several places that do that kind of, you know, wood-fired pizza, little artisanal type stuff.
With fresh
yum,
basil
yum, yum.
from the garden, you know, it's Sonoma.
Oh, let's see. When teleportation is ready, you just send an invite. I'm there.
Right on.
And lastly, what is your preferred method of communication? This is a multiple choice: email, mobile SMS, phone call, video call, or instant message.
I mean, text just gets my distracted brain very clear. Like, here's the text. Respond immediately. So I kind of love text.
Text. All right. And
Nothing wrong with that.
And Dave, we've gotten several guests that have said text is the way.
Mm-hmm.
You know, Steve Cadigan was on and he said text.
Yeah. I mean, I also like Slack because I can get there when I need it. Mm-hmm. So Slack is like a time delayed text. Yeah.
Well, you know, speaking of communication and texting, I want to let you know, just like Sally said, if you want to get a hold of her, you want to follow her, you want to find out more about what she's about, what her company does, and you're interested, this kind of piqued your interest a little bit, you can follow Sally. Let us know. I don't want to say it. You say it. You tell the people where you want people to look for you.
I mean, LinkedIn, I think, has the most content. But also we've been blogging on the website. So it's on both spaces, depending on which format you like. So LinkedIn is Sally Thornton, Thornton. And the website is forshay.com, FORSHAY. And my Twitter is crap. Don't worry about it.
Don't worry. Just don't even look. Just hit her on LinkedIn.
C or a K?
Wow. Well, Sally, you've been a wonderful sport. Absolutely. We need to have you back on again
Thank
to talk about all those other things we didn't get around to. But before we get to all these other little things, I want to remind you, if you've been watching this on the live or the playback, let us know what you think. Let us know if we're on track with the topics. Maybe you have a topic that you want us to explore. Hit that subscribe, get notified, send us those comments. I actually look at those. Dave looks at it. We have a team of folks that also help us on this effort so that we can bring you the best content possible. And folks like Sally, you like her? Tell us. Bring her back on. Maybe we make it a series with Sally and her crew. Maybe she'll give us some pointers on what we could do better so that we can talk to you, our audience, on these wonderful topics. All right. Dave, you want to say something?
So we started this segment. We started this off with our trivia question. I want to throw the trivia question back up here, and very interesting question. So, Sally, what do you say? Did Thomas Edison invent the job interview as we know it in 1921?
I should have Googled it.
2 in a row. 2 guests now saying the same thing.
I'm going to go with false.
Drum roll. True.
Oh!
Wow. Look at that.
So what are the facts in there? When he interviewed candidates for research assistant positions, he offered them a bowl of soup. Why? He wanted to see whether they would add salt or pepper to the soup before they tasted it. Oh. Those who did so were automatically ruled out. He should have that was the bias, right? That was his built-in bias.
Yeah. Like his bowl of soup must have been the bomb, and he didn't want anybody to mess around with it, right?
Well, it goes back to what is your assumption? Because maybe he put so much salt and pepper in that you just added more salt and pepper and you made it like really gross.
Right.
So I love it because he's like, don't make assumptions.
There you go. I don't know what else to add to that, but that's a fascinating one. You got me, Ori. I had no idea on what was going on there, but that was great.
Can you imagine sitting down for a job interview and they don't offer you coffee? They offer you a bowl of soup.
Or artisanal wood-fired pizza. Sit down and
bone broth.
Exactly.
There we go.
You go to Basil, you are fired. Yeah.
Right. Oh, classic.
Well, Sally, thank you for coming on. We appreciate you being on air, sharing your thoughts, sharing your experience, enlightening us today. And I want to invite you, if you liked what you heard from Sally today, we have some other videos. Where am I pointing to, Ori? The other direction. Right over here in these videos, Dave and I will be waiting for you with some interesting nuggets on work, remote work, and what to do with technology like webcams that allow you to stand out when you do have that video interview. We'll see you soon, and see you in this next videos.